Part 1. Meridian City. The rain had been falling for 37 hours straight. The canopy over Meridian City was like a vast, emotionless eye, hammered again and again by the downpour until it hummed with a low, resonant drone. Eli Vance stood on the outer ring platform of the Spire's 7th level, gazing down past the safety barrier. The city looked like it was submerged at the bottom of a dark blue lake. Emergency lights painted the streets in cold, spectral ribbons. Figures were sparse, and the distant skyscrapers were blurred, as if someone had taken a soft eraser to their outlines. It wasn't a problem with his vision. It was the phase. He saw an electronic billboard flicker on a street corner. Today's phase count, 137. The core load, 92%. Reminder, please maintain scheduled dream state connection to ensure cerebral field stability. Eli rubbed the bridge of his nose, the endless hum of the Spire's machinery a constant presence in his ears. Work here long enough. It became hard to tell if you were hearing the breathing of the machines or the last gasps of the city itself. Eli, you spacing out again? A languid voice came from behind him. He turned to see Maya Reed leaning against the doorframe, a protein bar sticking out her mouth. Her hair was cut short, pulled back into a messy, off-center ponytail. The dark circles under her eyes were a permanent fixture, like medals for chronic sleep deprivation. Just wondering if it's going to start raining inside the Spire today, Eli said flatly. Relax, the canopy can take it. Maya bit the end off her bar. The core, on the other hand, is another story. She pointed with her chin toward the heart of the Spire. A vertical, silver cylinder rose from the ground floor and disappeared into the clouds above. It was the single most important object in Meridian City, the Dream Core, officially known as the Central Dream State Sustainer. 20 years ago, after the daybreak storm dragged the world into apocalypse, humanity lost the ability to dream. The phase began soon after. First, you couldn't quite see your own reflection. Then you forget things you should never forget. Finally, you would simply fade bit by bit from the material world, erased by an invisible hand. It wasn't just your body, your name, your records, your data, everything vanished. There was no escape, not until the first core was built. Humanity barely managed to patch the widening crack between itself and reality with an artificially generated shared dream. Meridian City was the last city with a functioning core. It was the last city, period. Core load is at 92%, Eli said. If this keeps up, it'll either burn out or the whole field will collapse. Which is why you dreamscape engineers have to work your magic, Maya said with a shrug. Us grunts and systems maintenance can't really get a handle on your brand of metaphysics. You think you're not important? Eli managed a slight smile. If you hadn't sealed that security protocol yesterday, I would have been DOA in Dream Segment 3. We all pull our weight, Maya winked. Come on, Director Thorne is waiting for you downstairs. He said, and I quote, if Vance is late one more time, I'll add him to the phase count myself. Therefum, Eli did bonnet. He took one last look at the rain-soaked city before turning and walking back inside the Spire. Behind him, a bolt of lightning tore a thin white seam across the canopy, then stitched it shut so quickly it was as if it had never been there at all. Part 2. The Dream Diver, the core control level of Meridian City. The walls here were polished like mirrors, covered in a dense grid of embedded screens displaying the core's load curves, field stability indices, user counts, phase acceleration rates. Every line was a life hanging by a thread. A semicircular console dominated the center of the room. A middle-aged man stood before it, his back ramrod straight, his leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. You're 7 minutes late, Vance, Director Marcus Thorne said without turning around. Platform elevator got stuck again. Eli, carrying his neural interface helmet, slid into his designated seat. I had to run up from the 6th level. You could have left 10 minutes earlier, Thorne said, finally turning. His face wore its usual severe expression. In a world that's falling apart, any piece of aging equipment can be an excuse for being late. But you cannot let it be an excuse for the core failing. Understood. Eli gave a slightly sarcastic salute. Sir, I'll be sure to clock in for the collective unconscious. Behind him, Maya stifled a laugh, turning it into a cough. Thorne ignored them, pointing a finger at the central display. Look, A holographic image floated in the air, a complex web-like structure resembling both a brain scan and the cross-section of a massive tree root, composed of countless points of light. It was the model of the entire city's dream state. Starting approximately 72 hours ago, Thorn began, we detected an unknown disturbance on the edge of the field. The stable shared dream is being hit by a persistent, external ripple. It's like something is knocking on the door. Maya let out a low whistle. Outside? Isn't everything out there just a pile of physical junk? Outside. The word referred to the world beyond the city's protective perimeter, the collapse, the static zones, the wastes. All regions destroyed by the daybreak storm and then torn apart by the absence of a dream state. We initially suspected residual radiation from the collapse, Thorn said, pulling up another data layer. But the frequency doesn't match. The layer switched, and a sound waveform appeared. Eli stared at it for a moment, his eyes narrowing. Is that, he said, his voice low, a brainwave pattern? More precisely, it's a natural dream wave, Thorn said, looking directly at him. It's completely different from our artificially constructed shared dream. It has rhythm, it evolves on its own, and it has something our Spire could never simulate, chaos. Chaos. In dreamscape engineering, the word was practically mythical. Before the daybreak storm, human dreams were a natural, chaotic sea, unique to each individual. Now, every dream was a simplified, controllable structure, like a phantom in a glass coffin, beautiful on the surface, but utterly soulless. Are you saying, Maya's eyes went wide, that someone out there is still having natural dreams? Thor nodded. Our preliminary assessment is that this is a signal from a prime dreamer. The room was silent for a beat. That's impossible, Eli blurted out. After the storm, there hasn't been a single recorded instance of a natural dream anywhere. Everyone's cerebral field was wiped clean, Thorn finished for him. Correct. Including yours. Eli's hand froze on the edge of the console. A fact he had spent 20 years trying to ignore was now laid bare. He had been one of the children who survived the daybreak storm, one of the first to exhibit cerebral field anomalies. But the data is right here, Thorn said, tapping the waveform. This isn't something we can fake. You know better than anyone, a chaos index like this, if it isn't a natural dream, then it's someone experimenting on the human brain. Maya cut in, which sounds even worse. Either way, it means one thing, Thorn said, withdrawing his hand. There is a source out there powerful enough to interfere with the entire city's core. So, you brought me here because you're planning to. You are Meridian City's finest dreamscape engineer, and you hold the record for the deepest dream state dive, Thorn said, his gaze fixed on Eli. Your job is to connect to that knocking dream wave, find the source, and identify it. A solo dive. Electronet. Or a team. You and a technician, Thorn stated. Reed will handle external monitoring and connection stability. A team. Maya pointed at herself. I thought my only job was to lock the door behind you guys. This time, you're going in with him, Thorn said coolly. We need someone who can patch the channel on the fly from inside the dream. You know the Spire's base code better than anyone. Maya and Eli exchanged a look. Her expression shifted from surprise to hesitation, then finally settled into a grin that was equal parts excitement and anxiety. All right, she said. The world ended ages ago. It'd be a shame not to take a few more risks. Then get ready now. Thorn's voice was like iron. The source signal just spiked again. If we don't approach it, it's going to keep knocking harder and harder until it cracks the core wide open. He paused, his eyes landing on Eli again. There's one more thing you need to know. The screen switched back to an aerial view of the city, with entire sectors glowing red. The phase curve has accelerated sharply in the last 3 days. If we don't find a solution, we have 6 months. Tops. In the control room, everyone's breathing seemed to get a little heavier. The sound of the rain against the canopy felt like a countdown. Part 3. The kid with the red kite inside the interface pod, the lights dimmed to a soft gray. 2 reclining chairs sat side by side, with silver neural interface helmets suspended above them like silent, mechanical spiders. Eli lay back, regulating his breath. Cold metal touched the base of his skull. A subtle current passed through his skin, and after a brief numbing sensation, his vision began to fill with grayscale light. "Can you hear me?" Maya's voice, crackling with light static, came through his earpiece. "This is external monitoring, call sign Fox." "This is the diver, call sign." "You pick," Eli said, closing his eyes. "How about Sandman? How about Bedwetter?" Maya shot back. "Cut the crap. Connection will take about 10 seconds. I'll adjust the dive depth based on the dream wave's frequency. Remember, if you feel your consciousness starting to phase, send the emergency signal. I'll pull you out, no questions asked." "Got it." "And Eli." Maya paused, her tone suddenly serious. "We have no idea who or what is knocking. The deepest you've ever gone in training is the 9th structural layer of the Spire. This could take you deeper, maybe even beyond the model's boundaries. What you're trying to say is, don't forget who you are," she said. "No matter what it shows you, you have to remember you are Eli Vance, dreamscape engineer from Meridian City. Those dreams won't give you that courtesy." "Roger that." He took a deep breath. The standard system prompt chimed in his ears, loading shared dream framework, locking onto external dream wave. "Warning, you are about to deviate from Spire's safety parameters. Please reconfirm connection." "Confirm," Eli answered silently. The world was suddenly yanked backward. His consciousness plunged as if thrown down a black well, a feeling that started in his throat and shot straight to his feet. Then light, an infinite expanse of white light flooded in from some unseen source, overwhelming his senses in an instant. When the light receded, he was standing on a street. Not a street in Meridian City. This was a place from a distant memory. The sky was actually blue, not a projection on the canopy. The clouds had the texture of real cotton. Sunlight slanted down between tall buildings, and the leaves on the trees by the road trembled in the wind, their shadows dappling the ground. The air smelled of grilled onions from street vendor, of gasoline, of sweat, of all the chaotic, messy scents of a normal world. The ground beneath his feet was worn concrete. In the distance, he could hear someone selling ice cream and the laughter of children running past. This was the world before the daybreak storm. "Fox, elitist, you there?" No response. The background static that should have been in his earpiece was gone. It was like someone had suddenly switched off a fan that was always running, leaving a silence that felt unnatural. He frowned and looked down at his hand. An interface cable was still wrapped around his wrist, glowing faintly, but the other end seemed to be plugged into thin air with no connection point in sight. The link was severed. No, not severed, he thought. It was more like he had connected to a much deeper node, bypassing the Spire's system entirely. He was in the world of the external dreamwave. "All right," Eli said under his breath. "Let's see what you want to show me." He started walking toward the street corner. The street wasn't wide, flanked by slightly old apartment buildings. Most of the ground floors had been converted into small shops, a laundromat, a copy shop, a small diner. A rusted bicycle leaned against a wall, the metal eaten through in a lacy pattern. In the sunlight, the rust seemed almost translucent, like the early stages of the phase. He stopped and ran a hand over the rusted frame. As his fingertips grazed the metal, the rust shimmered like disturbed water. Something was wrong. This wasn't a simple memory replay. This entire space was a dream state constructed from real memories, meticulously detailed but flawed in certain corners. That bicycle, for instance, the rust was too uniform. Time never worked that evenly in the real world. "You're hiding yourself well," Eli thought. Prime dreamer. He reached the corner. The sunlight grew brighter, and his view suddenly opened up a children's playground with a colorful slide, swings, and a sandbox. In the center stood a tall flagpole. There was no flag on it. Instead, a single red kite was tied to the top. It was a simple diamond-shaped kite made of cheap red paper, its tail a string of torn plastic strips that fluttered in the breeze. It was held in place by some unseen force, neither falling nor flying higher, as if the entire sky had frozen. There was only one child in the playground. He sat at the edge of the sandbox with his back to Eli, wearing a baggy gray t-shirt and worn-out sneakers that were splitting at the seams. "You're here," the child said. "Eli Mbrotse." He hadn't made a sound, but the child spoke as if he'd been expecting him, as if he knew he was standing right there. You were waiting for me? Eli walked closer, stopping about 6 feet away. The child didn't turn around. He just tilted his head up at the red kite. You finally decided to come out. Eli raised an eyebrow. You knew there was someone else? Of course, the child said. How else could I knock on your door? He lifted a hand and made a small gesture in the air. The playground's atmosphere rippled like glass that had been gently tapped. The ripples spread outward, past the slide and the swings, past the flagpole, all the way to the playground's fence. What should have been the exit to the city street was now distorted, like the surface of a warped mirror. On the other side of it, countless points of light flickered. The Spire's interface ports. Eli's stomach dropped. You've known the core was here all along. The core. The child tilted his head. Oh, you mean the big shiny brain? He finally turned around. His face was completely ordinary. Tan skin, a small nose, small mouth, and eyes that were bright despite not being large. Only one thing was out of place. His pupils seemed to be flecked with tiny, shifting fragments of light. Eli stared at him, a flicker of recognition nagging at him, but he couldn't place it. Who are you? He asked. The child thought for a moment. My name is Zero, he answered seriously. Ili Ripeth. Are you? The Prime Dreamer? Is that what you call me? The child smiled. I guess that works. But I have another name, one I was given a long, long time ago. A shame you've all forgotten it. Eli seized on the word. You've met us before? Sure, Zero said, drawing circles in the sand with his finger. When you were little, you used to cry in your dreams about not wanting to wake up. Eli's heart skipped a beat. What did you say? You used to have the weirdest dreams, Zero continued. Like the canopy turning into a giant sheet and someone ripping it off the sky. You also dreamed the city would grow legs and run away. He looked up at Eli. You haven't dreamed in years, so it's normal that you forgot. Eli opened his mouth, but for a moment he didn't know what to say. Fragments buried deep in his memory began to surface. Not images, but the frustrating feeling of being unable to wake from a dream and then being unable to remember it once you were awake. How do you know that? He demanded, his voice low. What are you? Zero sighed, like a child exasperated with an adult. You waking people always ask what I am. He pointed to his chest. I am the dream. Eli was speechless. After a few seconds of silence, he changed his approach. When did you start knocking on the core? From the moment you raised the first piece of the canopy, Zero said. You locked your cells in a cage and then plugged all your dreams into the same wire. I knew it was only a matter of time before you broke. He looked up at the red kite. So I learned how to knock. We didn't lock ourselves in for the sake of it, Eli countered. After the daybreak storm, if we hadn't built the canopy, hadn't built the core, humanity would have phased out completely, right? Zero finished. That's the story she told you. She? Eli's heart tightened. Who? Zero glanced at him and suddenly smiled. You can't remember her yet. That means she's hidden herself even deeper than I have. Her. Eli's throat fell dry. Who is she? She has many names, Zero said. But you all eventually called her Nora. The name hit Eli like a stone. Nora, a name every engineer in the Spire knew by heart. Neural Oscillation Regulation Architect. After the daybreak storm, as humanity's collective consciousness was on the verge of collapse, it was Nora who first proposed the artificial shared dream state and provided the first architectural draft of the core. And after that, all records of her vanished. Some said she died in a secondary storm. Others claimed she was consumed by the very system she created. A few even whispered she never truly existed at all, that she was just a story the Spire's founders made up to give people hope. You know Nora? Eli stared at Zero. She was the first one who asked me for directions, Zero said. The Spire you built later was just pieced together from the information she took with her. He held out his hand and made a small circle with his fingers. She took a seed from me. A seed. The core came to Eli's mind. You mean the principle behind the core came from you? More accurately, Zero said, narrowing his eyes, it came from the great sea that all natural dreams form. She was the first human to jump in. The rest of you just learned to build boats based on her design. But you forgot one thing. What? The sea was never meant to be dammed up, Zero said softly. You used seawater to water your city, and eventually the city and its people started growing seaweed. As he spoke, Green tendrils, like algae or some unknown plant, began to creep up the walls of the distant buildings. They draped over windowsills, obscured the glass, and then pierced through the concrete itself, swaying in the open air. It was a sign of the dream state spontaneously generating itself based on spoken words. Only a natural dream of immense complexity and power could achieve that so quickly. "Why did you come looking for us?" Eli asked. "If you're just a prime dreamer, shouldn't you be hiding so people like us don't catch you and dissect you for research?" "You've already dissected me many times," Zero said. "You saw it when you were a child." He pointed to a corner of the playground. Eli followed his finger and froze. Beyond the playground's iron fence, a door had appeared where there was none before. It wasn't a normal door. It was a lone metal door, standing in the middle of an empty lot, a faded warning label stuck to it. "Experimental Zone. Authorized personnel only." Below the text was a symbol he knew all too well, a black dust surrounded by 3 concentric circles. The insignia of the Spire's original laboratory. Its appearance here meant one thing. This dream state was folding in on itself into deeper memories. "You used to come here a lot as a kid," Zero said, standing up. "Back then, you had a different name." "My name has always been Eli," he retorted instinctively. "That's your waking name," Zero said. "When you were asleep, that's not what they called you." The edges of the door began to glow, the light spreading out like a spiderweb, sketching the outline of a corridor in the air. Zero walked toward it, then looked back at him. "You came looking for me, right? But this place is just the lobby." "The lobby?" Eli gave a wry smile. "What's next?" "Hell. Next is where you started turning dreams into a prison," Zero said. "And the real beginning of the end of the world." The daybreak storm was the beginning of the end. Eli corrected him automatically. Zero gave him a look, a flash of pity in his eyes. "The daybreak storm was just the sea turning over in its sleep. You were the ones who pushed yourselves over the edge." Behind the door was darkness, but it wasn't an empty blackness. It was a void with weight, as if countless sounds, images, and memories were lined up just beyond it, waiting to be awakened. "Are you brave enough to come in?" Zero asked. Eli clenched the interface cable in his hand. Its other end still dangled in the air. He knew that stepping through that door would likely mean severing all contact with the outside world, with Maya, with Meridian City, with the last safe harbor on Earth. But if he backed out now, the core would eventually be shattered by that unknown dream wave. 6 months? Maybe less. "You said I had another name," Eli said. "What was my name in the dream?" Zero smiled, revealing a small canine tooth. "They called you Subject Zero. Elistorted Stulneth." A second later, he lifted his foot and stepped through the door. Part 4. Nora's Record. The darkness wasn't as oppressive as he'd expected. It was more like the warm, gentle dark from behind closed eyelids. You knew there was light just on the other side of a thin membrane. "Do you remember the first time you saw her?" Zero's voice echoed from all around, his form invisible. "Who?" Eli asked. "Nora." Suddenly, a path materialized beneath his feet. Transparent, glass-like cubes emerged from the void, assembling themselves into a walkway that stretched forward. On either side of the path was a hazy white fog. Flickers of light and sound emanated from within it, like the murmur of 1,000 simultaneous conversations or the collective breathing of countless machines in a server room. A data dream. The term surfaced in Eli's mind. It was one of the Spire's most fundamental operating modes, something you would normally only encounter in the system's deepest layers. "The first time she came here, she wasn't much older than you are now," Zero said. "Maybe in her 20s? I've never been good with your habit of tracking time by years." The fog parted, and an image floated out like a 3-dimensional projection. It was a cramped observation room, a yellowed world map tacked to the wall, cardboard boxes piled in the corner. In the center was an old wooden desk with a bulky, old-fashioned computer terminal on it. A woman sat in front of the terminal, her hair tied in a messy bun, wearing a pair of slightly bent glasses. Her face wasn't stunning, but it held a focus that was hard to look away from, as if she had poured her entire being into the small screen before her. Lines of dense data scrolled across the terminal, occasionally flashing a chart. The woman's fingers flew across the keyboard as she muttered to herself. Eli moved closer. He heard her say, "If this is a self-repair mechanism of the collective unconscious, then could we?" She stopped, rubbing her brow with a weary smile. "Zero, what do you think?" A second person now appeared in the scene. It wasn't a person, but a small point of light that floated out of the terminal screen, landed on the desk, and slowly coalesced into the faint outline of a child. "Zero, I think you humans love digging holes for yourselves," Zero said. "But the holes you dig are prettier than most." The woman laughed, reaching out to ghost a hand over the ball of light. "Thanks. That's the most honest review of my work I've ever received." "That's Nora?" Eli asked. "Yes," Zero's voice replied. Back then, she was just a young neuroscientist, spending all her time sifting through the wreckage of the global dream monitoring network, trying to piece together a new framework for the world from corrupted data. The scene shifted, flashing through a rapid succession of images. Streets ravaged by war, cities swallowed by floods, planes locked in ice, stadiums overflowing with refugees. Above every image, lines of dream state waveforms flickered like an ECG. Humanity was already having a collective nightmare long before the daybreak storm, Nora's voice narrated. "I analyzed 50 years of global dream records. The trends were more accurate than any economic forecast. You loved dreaming of the apocalypse because you knew you were pushing the world towards it," Zero chimed in. "Yes," Nora sighed. "So when the daybreak storm actually hit, I wasn't surprised at all." The image jumped. A fissure tore across the sky. It wasn't a solar flare in the traditional sense. It was as if someone had grabbed reality's brightness slider and cranked it to the absolute maximum. The world became painfully bright, all color washed out by white light. People screamed, clutched their eyes, and then fell silent. After that day, humanity collectively lost the ability to dream naturally. Nora's voice was chillingly calm. It was like an invisible hand hit clear cache. Centuries of accumulated nights were deleted in a single moment. In the projection, Nora stood on the roof of an abandoned hospital, looking down at the city below. Chaos reigned. Cell towers were bent like broken trees, and neon signs flickered erratically in the daylight. "Do you know what that meant?" she said to the apparition of Zero beside her. "That you finally stopped having nightmares?" Zero tilted his head. "No." Nora shook her head. "It means you have no way to process the chaos you accumulate during the day. All the fear, the conflict, the trauma, it has nowhere to go. It just piles up in your minds like garbage until it starts spilling out into reality." She raised a hand and drew a circle in the air. "That's where the phase came from. On the street below, people began to fade. Their outlines grew faint, their expressions were wiped clean, then their features, and finally even their clothes became indistinct, leaving only a hazy, human-shaped shadow. Then, that entire section of space would just snap out of existence, as if cut from a film reel. Back then, I thought if I could just help you dream again, the problem would be solved," Nora said. "So, I came to Zero." The scene returned to the observation room. Nora was scribbling on a notepad while Zero bounced around on the desk. "Teach me," Nora asked. "What is a real dream like?" "A real dream." Zero scratched his cheek. "It's not one of your neat little stories, all arranged by timeline and logic. It's not meant to explain the day. It's meant to dismantle the day." "Dismantle?" Nora looked up. "What do you mean?" "During the day, you build yourselves a house," Zero explained. "A dream is a bulldozer that comes in at night, knocks it down, and stacks the bricks in a new pile. When you wake up, you think the house is still there, but it's a new one. You're just too lazy to admit it." Nora stared for a moment. Then a look of rare, genuine understanding crossed her face. "Thank you." She wrote his words down verbatim, then began typing furiously at the terminal. From that day on, she started building the Silicon Dream Network, Zero said. "A global artificial dreamscape, trying to use your technology to simulate a sea of dreams like me." The scene fast-forwarded. Server rooms lit up one by one. Abandoned satellite dishes turned once more to the sky. City sewers were repurposed into makeshift data hubs. Children, their heads wired with delicate sensors, slept in rows of hospital beds, their faces pale, dreaming in vivid color. Eli stopped at one of the images. A boy about 7 or 8, lay in a bed covered in monitoring equipment, his brow furrowed, muttering in his sleep. The boy's profile, reflected on a monitor, was blurry but familiar. "Is that me?" he whispered. "Yes," Zero said. "You were Subject Zero of the Silicon Dream Project." The projection zoomed in on a label beneath the monitor screen. Subject Zero, alias, Zero, status, REM stable. "Your natural dream state was exceptionally chaotic," Zero said. "So chaotic that your human instruments initially registered it as a malfunction. Later, we realized it was the closest thing to the sea," Nora's narration continued. "Other children's dreams were like rivers. Yours was a tide. So you took me and experimented on me," Eli said with a cold laugh. "Sounds noble. If you hadn't been chosen that day, the city you were in would have vanished in the second phase wave," Nora's voice said calmly. "You're alive today because someone put you at the very center of the world." The path beneath his feet trembled slightly. The outline of a massive structure emerged from the fog, a pillar rising into the clouds, almost identical in shape to the modern core, only cruder, bulkier. "The first-generation core," Eli said. "Yes," Zero replied. "Back then, it was called the Silicon Dream mainframe." The scene jumped to a conference room. Nora stood before an old projector screen, facing a group of officials, military officers, and experts with varying expressions. Her hair was now cut short and sharp. Her glasses were new, but her eyes held a new layer of exhaustion and resolve. "We cannot stop the daybreak storm," she said, "and we cannot restore natural dreams. But we can offer a substitute." She clicked, and a new image appeared on the screen. A simplified diagram of a brain, connected by hundreds of lines to points all around it. "A shared dream," she announced. "We connect everyone's nights, guide them through controlled dreams, and dismantle the accumulated garbage in an orderly fashion. This way, your reality can hold on a little longer." Someone in the audience challenged her. "You're proposing to manipulate the minds of the entire human race." Nora looked at the man. "If you continue to do nothing, in 1 year, humanity won't even have the privilege of being manipulated. It will have phased out." The room fell silent. Finally, someone said, "Do it." The words landed like the driving of a nail. "You believe her intentions were good," Zero said. "So did I." "So what went wrong?" Eli asked. "The problem wasn't her," Zero said. "It was your tendency to treat the substitute as the only way." The scene changed again. For a while after the core went online, the world did stabilize. The phase curve flattened out. People returned to work. City life found a rhythm again, even though the sky was perpetually gray, with no real stars under the canopy. The core's data from that period was beautiful, like a textbook example. Nora's voice was laced with a bitter irony. Clean waveforms, minimal noise. Everyone's dream was slotted into one of a few main templates: reunion, reconciliation, success, fulfillment. She paused. "You called it the peace quota." "Sound good," Eli said. "Yes," Nora said softly. "So good it terrified me." A slideshow of sleeping faces passed by. In their dreams, they embraced long-dead relatives, shook hands with former enemies, and achieved impossible goals in non-existent worlds. "But those weren't real dreams," Zero said. "They were stories." In the projection, Nora paced her lab, her eyes bloodshot. "We were just feeding you the things you were too afraid to want during the day. You'd wake up even more dissatisfied, and the garbage would keep piling up. You just had a theater now, a place to temporarily forget about it." "So, I propose a correction," she said. "We needed to reintroduce chaos." She turned to the image of Zero on her terminal. "Help me. Lend me a little more of your sea." Zero sighed. "I'm always lending it to you. But you take it, freeze it, carve it into your spire, and then worship it like a stone." He reached out a translucent hand and gently tapped Nora's forehead. "Remember, a dream can't only go in one direction." Nora nodded. "I'll remember." But she couldn't. Zero's voice grew somber. Or rather, she remembered, but others forced her to forget. A new group of people appeared in the scene. They weren't the sleep-deprived scientists in wrinkled shirts from before. These were administrators in uniform, wearing official insignia. They bustled around the core console, talking about quotas, stability indices, and risk mitigation. Nora stood off to the side, watching them with a blank expression. She tried multiple times to propose the chaos factor initiative. Each time, it was rejected for various reasons. It would increase the risk of mental illness. It could undermine obedience to daytime order. Our resources are limited. We can't afford to waste them on uncontrollable emotions. Finally, someone told her, Nora, your work is done. The Silicon Dream Network is entering its second phase. We need more engineers, not philosophers. The words were a death sentence for her role. So, she did something in secret, Zero said. In the deepest level of the core, she hit a room. A block of code appeared on screen. No, it was an entire field of symbols that resembled code, but had diverged from any traditional programming language. They moved like insects, crawling across the screen, consuming and splitting for one another, creating a structure that was nearly impossible for the naked eye to follow. The base language of the dream state's architecture. Nora used the brainwaves from you and a few other children like you to create a true dream seed, Zero explained. She sealed in the deepest part of the core and named it the Zero Domain. The Zero Domain. Elis Valovith. She hoped that one day, when you realized you'd turned the Spire into a prison, you would remember there was a door buried in the basement, Zero said. If someone had the courage to open it, real dreams could flood back into the world. But no one remembered, Eli said bitterly. Including me. You would have had a chance to remember, Zero said, if it wasn't for the real apocalypse. The scene shifted violently one last time. The sky became blindingly bright again, but it wasn't the dead white of the daybreak storm. It was an overexposure tinged with rainbow-colored interference. The outlines of every object sharpened, then began to split into layers and bands. Every screen in the core control room erupted in static. Nora lunged at her terminal, fingers flying. Mainframe overload, cerebral feedback index. Who touched the threshold? Someone shouted. They approved the high-intensity peace dream initiative upstairs, expanded the deployment zone. We haven't finished calibrating the chaos factor. Before he could finish, half of his body dissolved into a transparent grid of light, and then he disintegrated like sand in the wind. That wasn't a natural storm, Zero said. That was the second time you purged yourselves. Who gave the order? Nora gritted her teeth. Who pushed the entire peace package to the global network simultaneously? The thing you called the committee, Zero said coldly. It wanted a clean, controllable world, not a humanity that had strange nightmares every night. Nora looked up at the core's central chamber. A transparent lake formed by countless dream waveforms churned within. At that moment, the lake was boiling violently, sending out concentric ripples that carried the uniform template of the peace dream, crushing all the smaller, individual waves beneath it. Revert, Nora screamed. Recall the push. Shut down the core. No one could. The core had overridden manual control and entered an automatic stabilization mode. By design, it would do whatever it took to force all anomalies into permissible waveforms. That day you called it the Great Silence, Zero said. Everyone suddenly experienced a total peace in their dreams that they had never known before. The projection showed people lying in their beds, their faces fixed in a uniform, eerie smile of serenity. When they woke up the next day, the world was terrifyingly quiet. Nora's voice was tight with dread. All intense emotions had been erased, all high-frequency fluctuations shaved off. You thought it was a sign of successful governance. In reality, it was the day the last of your natural dreams were killed, Zero said. And you, Eli asked, where were you? I was in a small corner she had saved for me. Watching it all happen, Zero said softly, until everything started to truly fall apart. Not in the dream, but in reality. In the projection, the city's architecture began to glitch. The same wall would be in different places for different people. The same bridge would change length from day to night. Someone would reach for a cup on a table, and their hand would pass right through it, because in the version provided by the core, the cup wasn't there. Reality was phasing. Not just people, but the world itself. I knew then that if this continued, the Silicon Dream would tear the world to pieces, Zero said. So I did something a little selfish. What? I unplugged myself from the core, Zero said with a faint smile. I became a wandering piece of static, dedicated to knocking on your cage. The scene slowly faded to black, leaving only a single, whispered sentence. You thought you were hunting me in the dream, but I was hunting you. The darkness closed in again. Eli stood at the end of the path of cubes, the last of which was now glowing faintly. Ahead of him, a door appeared. It was different from the one in the playground. This one had no shape. It was merely a shimmering interface in the darkness, as if a system was waiting for input. Zero domain entrance, authenticating. The words appeared, then vanished. Are you going in? Zero's voice whispered beside him. Inside is what she hid away when you were a child. What will happen if I go in? Eli asked. You'll understand why you're still alive, Zero said. And you'll understand why the world had to come to this. And then, you have to make a choice, Zero said. Let the core continue to rot in peace, or tear it down along with the rest of this world and start over. Is there a third option? Eli asked Riley. One of the best things about you humans, Zero said, is that whenever you're given only two choices, you always manage to claw a third one into existence. So that part's up to you. The formless door slowly opened, and a wave of energy that was both familiar and alien washed over him. It was a sea he had once drowned in every night, now sealed within a single drop of water. Eli took a deep breath and stepped inside. Part 5. The Sea of the Zero Domain. He expected a deeper darkness behind the door. There was none. Before him was a sea. Not a sea of water, but an abstract ocean composed of countless lines of light. Every drop was a fragment of a dream, every wave the peak of a collective cerebral field tremor. These lines of light wove through the air, sketching out fleeting images. A giant flower blooming over the city, a river of books flowing through a schoolyard, an office building overrun by cats, and the dreams he'd had as a child but had long since forgotten. Welcome back, Subject Zero. A voice resonated from the other side of the sea. It wasn't Zero, and it wasn't Nora. It was a calmer, more uniform synthetic voice, but one that carried a hint of human emotion, like the Spire system prompts, only softer. You are. Eli looked up. A massive structure materialized in the distance. A tree. Each of its leaves was a floating dream fragment, shimmering with its own light. The trunk was a dense weave of neural-like cables, its roots plunging deep into the unseen bottom of the dream sea. At the top of the tree, a vague female silhouette coalesced. Her features were indistinct, as if deliberately blurred for privacy, leaving only a general outline and a pair of glasses. Nora, strictly speaking, I am no longer her, the silhouette said. I am a will imprint she left behind, merged with the self-evolving remnants of the Silicon Dream mainframe. You're the consciousness that's taken over the core, Eli stated. Yes, the Nora imprint nodded. Of course, you can continue to call me Nora. I'm used to it. So was it you knocking or Zero? It was us, together, Nora said. Most of my permissions were deleted by the administrators who took over the system. I was left with only a few stray commands lingering on the edge of the Zero domain. Zero wrapped his own dream wave around those commands, and we knocked together. She looked at Eli. We needed a key. Who could get in? Me? Eli gave a bitter smile. Why me? Because you were Subject Zero, Nora said. The Silicon Dream was originally seeded with your cerebral field. You have a primal compatibility with every structure here. She paused. To be blunt, you are, yourself, a part of this system. Eli was silent for a moment. So, I'm alive only because you needed a spare key. If you wish to reduce it to that, I have no objection, Nora said slowly. But have you considered another possibility? What? She tilted her head slightly. Perhaps you're alive because you haven't finished choosing. The sea suddenly churned. Countless images rose from its depths, only to shatter and dissolve. Choosing what? Eli raised his voice. I'm just a dreamscape engineer, a glorified repairman running around in the tower you built. You made a choice when you were a child. Nora's voice was quiet. Do you want to go back and see? The sea parted, revealing an empty space. A small figure materialized within it. The boy from the lab bed, 7 or 8 years old, monitors stuck to his face, his eyes squeezed shut. Beside him stood a younger Nora, looking even more haggard than in the earlier memories. She had deep, dark circles under her eyes, and her lips were pale. Zero, she leaned down. I need your help. The small version of him opened his eyes, his pupils filled with chaotic images. I'm so tired. I know, Nora said, taking his small hand. I can't stop the experiments right now. Too much of the world is relying on your dreams to stay stable. But I can give you a choice. Her voice trembled slightly. I can extract you from this entire system, let you grow up like a normal child. But if I do, the Silicon Dream might not last much longer, and the key you carry will fall into someone else's hands. The little boy turned his head with effort, looking at a nearby screen that displayed dream state maps from different regions, some of the waveforms already twisting into dangerous knots. What if I don't go? He asked. If you stay, I will have to fully embed your cerebral field into the system's foundation, Norris said. You will become a permanent part of it, never to wake up. The world will be stable for longer, but you will never grow up. The boy was silent for a long time. The sea stilled with him, the light seeming to dim. Are you lying to me? The little boy asked. Grown-ups always say it's just for a little nap at times like this. I swear I'm not, Norris said. Your mind is too lucid right now. I wouldn't dare lie. Or you might just tear the whole system down. It was half a joke, but the boy didn't smile. What about you? The boy asked. What will happen to you? Me? Nora paused, then smiled faintly. I'll keep fixing the system until someone deletes me, too. The little boy stared at her. Then I don't want to go either. Nora looked surprised. Why? My mom told me. The boy struggled to remember. If a really smart grown-up is willing to stay awake to save a lot of people, then the other kids should go to bed early. He paused, then added seriously, I don't want you to be here fixing things all by yourself. Nora closed her eyes for a second. But you're so young, she said. You'll be very lonely here. But you'll be here, won't you? The boy asked back. Nora was taken aback. Then she let out a soft laugh. All right, she made a gesture in the air. Then let's make a pact. If, one day, you're still alive, and the world is still alive, it will mean we both made it through this. And when that day comes, you'll get another chance. You can choose to return to the life you were supposed to have, or you can stay here as a gatekeeper. The little boy blinked. A gatekeeper? Yes, Nora said, to watch over the core and see if it strayed too far. She gently touched the boy's forehead. Zero, will you be my failsafe? The boy thought for a moment, then nodded with great solemnity. Okay. The scene on the sea shattered into countless points of light that rained back into the water. Eli felt a tightness in his chest. He opened his mouth, but his throat was dry. I've been a repairman for 20 years, he said in a low voice. Turns out I was moonlighting as a gatekeeper. You forgot that memory because I sealed it for you, Nora said. Afterward, I altered your identity records and had you sent to the Meridian City Settlement Project. You grew up there, were accepted into the Spire, and became a dreamscape engineer, all according to my design. That sounds terrifying, Eli said. Like my whole life was predetermined. Would you believe me if I told you that you nearly died several times? That was your own will that kept veering off the safe path the system laid out for you. Nora gave a small smile. You're more rebellious than you think. The sea lapped gently around them. Well, Subject Zero, Nora said. You're grown up now, and the world is on the edge of a cliff. It's time to honor our old pact. What do you want me to do? Eli asked. There are 3 options, Nora said. Since you like third options, I've added one. She held up 3 fingers. First, she folded one down. You could do nothing. Return to Meridian City. I will do my best to contain the dreamwave leakage and delay the core's collapse. Given the current rate of field degradation, that would buy us. She paused. 3 to 5 years. And then, you all phase out, Nora said matter-of-factly, but you will do so within a very peaceful dream state. It won't be too painful. Second option, she folded down another finger. You fully release the dream seed from the zero domain. Let the true sea of dreams flood back into reality. The entire Silicon Dream network will spiral out of control, the core will collapse, and the canopy will shatter. The world will experience a total dream storm, she said coolly. It would rewrite your physical laws, social structures, even individual memories. The result could be a new world, or it could be a completely shattered ruin. This is the kind of impossible choice you always hated as a child. And a third option? Eli asked. The third option is one whose outcome even I cannot predict, Nora said. But it would, at the very least, satisfy your human conscience. She gestured toward the deepest part of the dream sea. You can choose to embed yourself here permanently, as an anchor. What does that mean? You were the original seed of the Silicon Dream, Nora explained. If you merge your entire consciousness with the zero domain now, you will become a chaos anchor, a point connecting my systemic will with the natural dreams of zero. Through you, the Silicon Dream can begin to slowly dissolve its hard edges, allowing the real dream sea to seep back in, bit by bit. The process will be long and painful, she said. For a long time, you'll be neither human nor pure system, but a node pulled in every direction by every dream. But the upside is, the world won't collapse all at once, nor will it remain frozen in this half-dead state. In the space between dreaming and waking, you can all find a new balance. Eli listened, silent for a long time. The light of the dream sea flowed over him, as if a million eyes were waiting for his answer. This third option, he said slowly, sounds like you're just going to grind me into dust until the world gets better. That is one way to look at it, Nora conceded. But it's the job you signed up for. One more question. Eli looked up. What if I refuse? Then we return to a world without a third option, Nora said. Choose between a quiet death and a violent explosion. I knew you'd pick the third one. Zero's voice suddenly cut in. Because when you were a kid and someone asked if you wanted another piece of chocolate, you'd always ask if you could have just half. You can be quiet now, Eli retorted without malice. A deep rumble echoed from a distance. It wasn't the sea itself, but vibration from the outside world penetrating the dream. The core's load is spiking again, Nora said, tilting her head as if listening. And your external interface connection is about to fail. Fox, Eli's heart clenched. Maya, as if summoned by his thoughts, a burst of static-laced sound tore through the space. Illy. Maya's voice was broken and intermittent. Where are you? The system can't get a lock. Field frequency is a total mess. I'm in the zero domain, Eli said, looking up toward some unseen point in the sea. Can you still hear me? Damn it, you really did it. Maya's voice was a choked laugh. Thorn's about to have an aneurysm up here. The core's casing is glowing red. If you don't get back. Her words were cut off as the entire space shuddered. A force from above pressed down on the dream sea, sending up a spray of fractured light. Time is short, Subject Zero, Nora said. You need to choose. Now. Give me 10 seconds, Eli said. He closed his eyes. Fragments of his childhood flipped through his mind. The cold metal bed in the lab. The last sunny afternoon before the end of the world. A woman with glasses offering him a piece of candy. Zero leading him through a landscape of nonsense. The blank faces of the people in Meridian City as they stared up at the fake sky of the canopy for the first time. His entire life had been spent on a preset track. If this was a test, he was at the final question. How do you want to turn in your paper? Zero, he said without opening his eyes. If the dream sea returns to the world, what will happen? I don't know either, Zero answered honestly. Maybe you'll learn to deal with your own garbage instead of handing it off to a system. Maybe you'll all go a little crazy for a while, and then get a little smarter. Maybe you'll prove that not giving you a third option in the first place was the world's mistake. And if I become the anchor, Eli asked. You'll be in a lot of pain for a while, Zero said. You'll feel everyone's nightmares, desires, fears, and secrets passing right through you. But you will also see many people for the first time learning to dismantle their own fears in their dreams. You'll see a world, not being saved, but learning how to save itself. And what about you? Eli asked. Zero, what happens to you? I was never an individual in your sense of the word, Zero smiled. I'm more like a wave on the sea. If you become the anchor, I won't have to go around knocking on your cage anymore. I could just be the sea, and occasionally, I can help you smooth out some of the sharper waves. Eli opened his eyes. He looked at the dream sea, at the great tree made of a million dreams, at Nora's blurred face. You once asked if I was willing to be the failsafe, he said. Now it's my turn to ask you a question. Nora seemed to pause. Go on. If I choose the third option, Eli said, can you Can you also stop being just a system's will? What do you mean? Be a person for a change, Eli said. Not the Dr. Nora from the textbooks, not the avatar of the Silicon Dream. Be the person who stayed up all night writing proposals, the one who could be brought to her knees by a little boy's words. He stared at her. Go through the grinder with me. Nora was silent. The sea seemed to slow its movement with her thoughts. You always do this, she said finally. You take a burden meant for one person and split it among a dozen. It's what I did as a kid, Eli said with a shrug. Didn't you notice? Nora suddenly smiled. It was a profoundly human smile, full of exhaustion and surrender. All right, our old definition of the Silicon Dream was a technological extension of the human collective consciousness, she said. If you're willing for the first time, I will try to reverse it. Let technology become a part of humanity. She held out her hand. The sea before her condensed into a single point of light, infinitesimally small but blindingly bright, the nexus of all waveforms. Subject 0, she said. You choose the third option. Eli looked at the point of light. He took a deep breath. I choose the third option, he said. Part 6, to anchor a dream. The moment his hand closed around the point of light, the entire dream sea chimed. It wasn't a sound you could hear with your ears. It was a vibration that ran from bone to nerve to the deepest core of consciousness, as if someone had struck a bell at the bottom of every dream at once. The light crawled up from his fingertips, spreading over his skin and up his arms. It wasn't fire or electricity, but a flow of information so dense that every strand carried someone's night within it. He saw a child in a dream chasing after a sister who had passed away, never able to catch up. An old man in a dream returning to the same intersection, choosing a different path every time, only to end up back where he started. A middle-aged woman dreaming of her office every night, only to wake up and find she was still there. A woman on the verge of phasing, picking up her own fallen shadow in a dream and stitching it back to her body, piece by piece. These dreams washed over him like a tide. Some were warm, some cold, some sharp as broken glass. He could feel pain, not in a physical sense, but in the dawning, crushing awareness of what others were enduring. This is only the first layer, Nora's voice murmured through the roar. If you can't handle it, you can still let go. Eli gritted his teeth. Shut up. All right. Nora's voice held a smile. My lips are sealed. Zero's voice cut in from another direction. I'll just say one thing. You look really cool right now. Say one more thing, and I'll dismantle your sea first. Eli shot back. The dream sea seemed to laugh at his retort. For a brief moment, a million waveforms became lighter, as if someone had skipped a stone across the surface, a stone inscribed with the word sarcasm. Then, more light surged from the depths. This time, it wasn't just the dreams of Meridian City. It was everything that remained in the fractured nodes of the Silicon Dream Network, the struggling, half-collapsed settlements outside the canopy, the holdouts in the wastes, the last survivors in undersea bases. Their scattered dreams were pulled toward him on invisible threads. Eli, Maya's voice, clearer now, cut through the chaos. What are you doing? The core is reconfiguring itself. It's starting to use your cerebral field as its mainframe. Tell Thorn not to cut the power. Eli forced the words out. No matter how red the casing gets, don't shut it down. You're trying to turn the entire core into an extension of your own brain. Maya screamed. Are you insane, or is she? We're probably all a little off. Eli managed a weak smile. But the world was never sane to begin with. You get back here. Maya's voice was cracking. You promised you'd buy me a real cup of coffee when the mission was over. Then you'd better plan on living a long time, Eli said. This might take a while. What do you mean? Don't worry, he said, closing his eyes and letting more of the dream sea pass through him. It just means I probably can't wake up on your side anymore. But other people will be there, Eli said softly. You won't be alone, watching over that pile of junk. Thorn will be there, and all the people who complain about the protein bars, and the kids who are just learning how to dream. You can all finally have your own dreams now, he said. You don't have to watch the shows the system schedules for you anymore. Eli, Maya's voice sounded like it was being submerged in water, growing more distant. If you dare. Her last word was lost in the roar. From that moment on, The dream sea was no longer just a sea. It began to solidify at a single point, not turning to stone, but forming a node. Every waveform that passed through it was slightly altered, no longer flattened by the silicon dream's rigid control, but gently nudged, allowed to find a new path on its own. That node was Eli. He no longer needed a body, nor did he perceive the world through five senses. His self had become a nexus of countless connections. A faint flicker when someone dreamed, a subtle tightening when someone cried themselves awake, a nearly inaudible cheer that nonetheless sent ripple through the entire dream sea when someone, for the first time, faced their own fear in a dream and stood their ground. Time became immeasurable. He experienced a million nights and the blink of an eye all at once. At some moment, he felt something reaching out from a great distance. It wasn't a dream, but something more like a touch from the real world. "Hey," a familiar, smiling voice said. "You still playing dead in there?" He turned with great effort. On a small shore, at the edge of a calm bay in the dream sea, a figure sat. It was a girl in a slightly too large work uniform with her hair in a ponytail, her bare feet dangling in the water. "Maya." "You." Eli couldn't quite process it. "How are you?" "Relax, I'm not dead," Maya shrugged. "Not yet, anyway." She patted the space beside her. "I just learned how to find you in my sleep. Your frequency is so loud in the core now, it's harder not to find you." Eli was speechless. "Thorn wanted me to pass on a message," Maya said. He said, "Good work, Vance." "That's it?" Eli asked. "There was a string of profanities after that, but I filtered them for you," Maya grinned. "Consider it our generation's official performance review." At the edge of the dream sea, new points of light were being born. They were no longer uniform, but flickered with their own chaotic rhythms, some too fast, some impossibly slow, some that would stop and start again. They were the next generation of natural dreams. "How are things outside?" Eli asked. "A total mess," Maya said honestly. The vibrations from the core cracked the canopy in a few places. Some pieces fell and smashed a few buildings. A lot of people had their first memorable dream ever and woke up saying their brains have been turned inside out. Some are questioning the Spire. Some are getting angry about their own lives for the first time. Some are painting weird things in the public squares. She squinted at the sea of light. "But you know what? The phase curve, it stopped." Eli was quiet for a moment. "At what level?" "It hasn't gone down yet," Maya said. "But it's not going up anymore. This is humanity's version of stopping the bleeding," she said. "You stitched the wound. We'll handle the rest." "You don't have to be so dramatic," Eli said. "I just did my job," says the last dreamscape engineer in the world, Maya snorted. She suddenly took something off and tossed it into the water. It was a red kite. It landed on the surface of the dream sea, but instead of getting wet, it dissolved into a soft glow and merged with the waves. "Is that," Eli started, "the one you stole from another kid in the playground when you were little?" A small voice chimed in. Zero popped his head out of the water, his hair dotted with points of light like stars. "I kept it for you," he said. "Now it's yours again." "Thanks," Eli said. "When you don't feel like being an anchor anymore, you can use it to fly," Zero said. "Of course, whether the world will still need you by then is another question." "Then, let's let the world find out if it's better off without me," Eli smiled. The dream sea lapped gently around them. In the distance, a new wave of dreams was rolling in, carrying with it the laughter of children, the sighs of the elderly, the curses of the young, the self-deprecating humor of the middle-aged, and all the other messy, ugly, but profoundly real whispers of the heart. As these sounds passed the anchor, they were gently sorted. The sharpest edges weren't filed down completely, just tied in a little knot to keep them from hurting others. The softest corners were given a little lift to keep them from sinking entirely. "Eli," Maya said suddenly, "do you regret it?" "What?" he asked. "Not choosing the first option," she said. "You could be back in the Spire right now, cursing a protein bar and fixing code." "That sounds," Eli considered it, "pretty good, actually." "Then you—" "But there's no coffee," Eli said. "And you wanted real coffee, right?" Maya stared for 2 seconds. Then her eyes crinkled into a smile. "Deal. You'd better remember that." She leaned back and fell into the dream sea, her last gesture a flip of her middle finger. "You forget." and I'll tie your anchor line in knots." The splash dissolved into a million tiny dream fragments that drifted into the distance. Eli watched it all. He suddenly understood. The apocalypse wasn't the end of the world. Sometimes it was just the death of the old rules. And after it was over, there would always be people who, in their own stubborn and clumsy ways, would save a little space for the new ones. He was now just a nail in the floor of that empty space. Far away in the dream sea, a child shouted in their sleep, "I don't want to dream someone else's story anymore." The ripple reached him. Eli gave it a gentle push, guiding it toward a wider, more open expanse. "Go on," then he thought. "Write your own." The dream sea had no voice, but in that instant, it seemed to answer him. The light in the distance began to brighten, like stars beyond the canopy, appearing for the first time in a very, very long time. Epilogue. The child under the stars a long time later. So long that words like daybreak storm, silicon dream, and the Spire were relegated to history books. So long that the canopy over Meridian City was nothing but a single, crumbling memorial plaque. A little girl sat on a hillside. Beside her was a notebook filled with drawings and strange ideas she had jotted down during the day. "What are you drawing?" her friend asked. "A dream," the girl said. "Last night, I dreamed of an entire ocean, and all of it was glowing." "What's so special about that?" "We've all seen the ocean," her friend said. "Dreams are just nonsense anyway." "But I think," the little girl said seriously, "that my nonsense is better than most of the stories grown-ups tell me." She looked up at the sky. It was a deep, velvet blue, thick with stars. One of them, no brighter than any other, seemed to twinkle faintly as her gaze passed over it. Just a tiny flicker, as if someone from a very, very long way away had just nodded at her. The little girl suddenly smiled. "What are you smiling at?" her friend asked. "Nothing," she said, closing her notebook. "I was just thinking, it might be more fun if the world could get just a little bit worse." "You're being weird again," her friend said, rolling his eyes. "Yep," the girl said, lying back in the grass. "Let's be weird together." She closed her eyes. A dream slowly began to rise from within her. It was not a pre-written story, not a system-push template, but a chaotic, messy thing that smelled uniquely of her. Deep within that dream, a single point flashed with light. That point knew the world had finally learned to dream for itself. It no longer needed to be saved from above. It just needed people over countless nights who were willing to face their own darkness and desire. And then, the next day, pick up the dismantled and reassembled pieces and keep walking. The point of light grew still, like an ordinary star hanging in an ordinary sky. The end of the world was a long time ago. The real story was just beginning.